welcome you and say welcome to the centre and to this exhibition, and to thank Bonile Bam for putting up this amazing show. And I'd like to introduce Sally Gore, who's going to talk to you about the exhibition. And Sally is an artist and photographer who works at the Wits School of Architecture and Planning. So thank you, Sally, for agreeing to open this show.
Thanks, Brenda. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very honoured to be opening this exhibition for Bonile. Where are you? There you are. So I'm afraid I get nervous when I have to speak publicly, and so I'm going to read my speech. Landscape photographs show histories of the land, its shape, the play of light on the landscape, its structure, form, geology, and geography. How we read them can be metaphorical or literal. The drama of light that picks up the textures of rocks in the foreground or shafts of light filtering through clouds can denote physical weight and lightness, can denote physical weight or lightness. How we travel through the landscape, if we walk through it physically, is especially useful to understanding it. When we look at large trees in a landscape, they show how they have taken root and how they have remained there, while we have left and returned over time, over many times. We cherish the presence of trees in the landscape since their scale shows not only their rootedness, but they are markers of place that give us a sense of belonging. Conversely, searching for a distant horizon might also signify the body's movement in space and a spatial travelling into the image. Bonile's practice embraces questions of place, movement and stasis, colonialism, and of framing a landscape. A selection is performed by the photographer. A characteristic framing of a view, deliberately constructed, forms the basis of a thinking process. Photography has an iconic function, J. Prosser writes. A still moment freezing the instant, the photographer's document allows the symbols to stand for the whole. Bonile Bam's photographs tell a story about Nelson Mandela and the place where he grew up. In one image, we see an uneven, winding road, a rocky landscape, heavy clouds, a simply constructed bridge and a river below. Sheep graze by the side of the road, a man travels on horseback, the road itself is empty. The images work upon us slowly, like the pace of walking through the landscape. They ask us to think about what is being depicted and why. This exhibition represents the grounds of history, in that we are offered glimpses of the landscape that was to shape Mandela, but importantly, we are witnessing it through the lens of hindsight, and thus we are also observing the history of the ground and the path of time. Through terse documentary photographs, Bam remains true not only to Mandela's humility and legacy, but also to the prosaic and sometimes harsh and straitened circumstances of rural life. These photographs are not taken from extreme angles in dramatic weather and lighting conditions. Rather, they show the modesty of pastoral life, intimacy of scale, and the slow process of becoming that characterized Mandela's life. Virtually absent of human presence, these photographs metaphorically inscribe the existence of people through worn paths and the desultory remains of buildings that also convey the passage of time. In the early part of Long Walk to Freedom, Mandela describes with poignancy and intimacy his own internal struggles growing up, his deep ambivalence and uncertainty, and his reflections about himself, amazingly, even his own insecurities. This, I believe, is mirrored in the somberness of Bam's photographs. As Mandela wrote in his autobiography, Justice and I became the best of friends, though we were opposites in many ways. He was extroverted, I was introverted. He was light-hearted, I was serious. Things came easily to him. I had to drill myself. We are given insight into Mandela's journey as he reflects on his life in Mvezo, a tiny village on the banks of the Mbashe River where he was born. Of Kunu and Mkekwezeni, narratives about the physical landscape, such as how much tell us much about Mandela's relationship to the land and his political awakening that formed the bedrock of who he became. As he writes, Kunu was all that I knew, and I loved it in the unconditional way that a child loves his first home. But when the time came to leave Kunu after his father died, he wrote about looking back at it while walking away with his mother to Mkekwezeni. Before we disappeared behind the hills, he writes, I turned and looked at what I imagined was the last time at my village. I could see the simple huts and the people going about their chores, the stream where I splashed and played with the other boys, the maize fields and green pastures where the herds and flocks were lazily grazing. Above all else, my eyes rested on the 3 simple huts where I enjoyed my mother's love and protection. We traveled by foot. It was an exhausting journey along rocky dirt roads, up and down hills, past numerous villages, but we did not pause. Eschewing a grand narrative, Bonile depicts views of the landscape and landmarks that are not widely known or familiar. The views are sometimes harsh and unforgiving, rocky landscapes that echo the humility and endurance that are a hallmark of Mandela's character. The spare and dry landscape and meandering dusty roads are also mute testimony to roads taken, of difficult paths, and of the effort required to take those paths. Likewise, a photograph of a book on a grinding stone with the title Studies in Texts is especially poignant, perhaps denoting oppositions between tradition and modernity and the conflicting and revelatory forces that he encountered at Hilltown, of difficult texts and the experiences that he had at Hilltown that were to lead him on the paths he took. Here Mandela's words highlight what those experiences meant to him. As he wrote, in my final year at Hilltown, an event occurred that was for me like a comet streaking across the night sky. A view of Kunu shows trees and homesteads dispersed over the landscape with cultivated fields, cleaved by the trunk of a tree. Here the permanence of nature is juxtaposed with the ever-changing development of human habitation. These photographs are in no way an attempt to illustrate Mandela's autobiography. Rather, they are symbols of lives lived, of cycles of plenty and scarcity, of the peaks and troughs, highs and lows, that a life well lived encompasses. They allow the spectator to ponder these views, to pause and reflect, and remember the impact that Mandela had on all our lives. They demand a slowness of contemplation. They require close looking and reading to comprehend the nuances of their meanings. Thank you. And Bonile would like to say a few words, so I'm very pleased to have him to address us.
Thanks very much, Sally, for sharing your wisdom. I would like to thank Nilofir for really helping me to organize this exhibition. There's also someone I might have forgotten, Dr. Irene Bronner, for laying the foundation for this exhibition. I cannot afford to forget Professor Brenda Shaman, who believed in this body of work. I have been working on this project for about 20 years without funding. I struggled for many years. I lost friends. I struggled. I did not even have money to support my family. But I would like to share, what led me to tell a story of Madiba through landscapes and structures. In 2003, I was working for a weekend newspaper here in Johannesburg. I received a call from someone who told me that Madiba was meeting international guests at the foundation. And I was invited to photograph or to cover that event. I did not believe that I qualified to be there. Someone said, you can do everything, but please do not use flashlight, because Madiba had problems with his eyes. I was uncomfortable because I was used to using flash as a newspaper photographer. When the event started, Madiba spoke about his childhood, his struggles, activism, imprisonment, presidency, and retirement. When he spoke about his childhood, I paused and listened. After the event, Madiba called me and said, I'm glad that you came, young man. You must treat a camera like a key. It will unlock many doors for you. I froze. I didn't know how to respond because the words were too powerful. I left South Africa a few months later to further my studies in the US. In 2005, I came back. I remembered Madiba's words. And I wanted to work on a meaningful project, but I didn't know how to approach it. I was thinking of going to the Nelson Mandela Foundation to inquire about Madiba's childhood. But I realized that as keepers of Madiba's legacy, they will have everything, but I didn't want to be restricted. Instead, I traveled to the Eastern Cape, where I'm from. The elders I met there said, we are happy to see you, young men. We are used to meeting white people. Sometimes we do not understand them. The fact that you want to tell a story about Dalibunga's childhood. Dalibunga is the name Mandela was given after he went to initiation school. Unfortunately, my plan was not necessarily to work on the project because my father was not well. I was on my way to visit my father, and I promised the elders that I will meet them when I return from Addis. When I came back, the elders said, we want to show you things about Madiba. Are you ready? I said, no. I returned to Joburg. I received a call that my father passed away. Traveled back to Eastern Cape. I didn't go to Mandela's, to the Mandela family. I went home after the funeral. I returned. They said to me, "Young man, you need to go to Mvezo, where Madiba was born. If you're ready, we'll take you there." On arrival there, one of the men said to me, in fact, he pointed on the ground and said, "This is where Madiba's umbilical cord is buried. You should start here." I did not have a plan, but I knew that I wanted to tell a story of Madiba through landscapes and structures, but I did not have a plan. So I returned to Joburg. My third trip, the gentleman said, "We'll show you everything where Madiba grew up, where he looked after livestock. So if you're interested, we'll take you to all those places." What I thought would take me 3 to 6 months, dragged, I think, for about 3 years. I bought black and white film and used a 35mm camera with the lens, traveling both from Joburg to Eastern Cape. In 2009, I was invited by the Nelson Mandela Foundation again. The person who called me said, "Bonile, are you around?" Meaning, I'm around Joburg. I said, "Yes." I was not in Joburg. I was in front of Madiba's house at home. This man said, "We want you to photograph Madiba's hands." I drove from Joburg to Konu the night before. In fact, when I leave Joburg, I would leave around 12 midnight and get there around 7, 8 in the morning. So I was tired. So when I heard that statement, I drove back, came to Joburg, I slept, visited the Mandela Foundation. Zal Daligrange and Professor Van Harris organized Madiba. They brought him to me, and then I touched his hands out of respect. I did not want to say a word because I didn't know what to say to Madiba. I was touching his hands. Suddenly, he wanted to know my background. Told him that I'm from Eastern Cape. I was born at Khotani village. Because Madiba was already old, I think he was about 92 years then. He said, "Oh, I remember Alice. I studied at Fort Hare University. Do you know Clarkbury and Hilltown?" I said, "No." He said, "You should visit those places." I didn't take him seriously. But in 2019, after my exhibition, this board of work that you see here has been exhibited here at UJ in 2018. But I felt that there's something missing because this is about his childhood. He grew up, he was born at Mvezo, grew up in Kagezweni, Kono and Kagezweni. But I wanted something about Clarkbury, Hilltown, and Fort Hare. During COVID, I traveled back to Eastern Cape, worked at Hilltown. I was surprised because I thought Hilltown, when I read Long Walk to Freedom, I thought I'll see gigantic buildings and everything else. I only found the place was destroyed. Only to find out that they were, unfortunately in 1976, the students, burnt the buildings. So I wanted to tell a story about the buildings that influenced Madiba's youth. And then I moved to Hilltown and Forte. Forte is known for producing intellectuals, but it has changed now because it's known for protests, killings, corruption, and everything. So I felt that this body of work represents the institutions that shaped Madiba's youth before he left Eastern Cape. Most of you might have expected me to have at least one portrait of Madiba. I have many of them. In fact, Sally forgot to mention that I'm writing a book about Madiba, which will be published before the end of this year. You will see there pictures that have never been published before. Reason being, I was at the center of activity. Robert Capa says, if your pictures are not good enough, you are not close enough. I wanted to be close enough to understand Madiba. Initially, I worked as an outsider. Without realizing, I found myself working inside Madiba's house. I had breakfast, dinner, I slept at his house, I interacted with members of the family, and I participated in things that I cannot talk about now. So I found Madiba's story sometimes so complicated and being a black person who was given access to Madiba early in 2003, I felt that I've built an archive that should be used to educate future generations. What you see is just a fraction of the story I told about Madiba. And I thank the University of Johannesburg for creating this opportunity, because this board of work that has taken me 20 years without any funding has left me fractured. Now, in conclusion, I would like to mention, one thing, that during 2011, some of you who might have read the newspapers, there were things that happened around the Mandela family. And I saw everything, but I could not comment. And the headlines would read, or would say something else, but something else happened. So these stories that I gathered over the years made me to sort of, confused, not sure if I should write about them or, forget, what I saw. As a photographer, you want to tell a story in order to inform the audience. But there were things that I had to ignore. That were important, but I felt if I capture them, that will cause cracks within the Mandela family. So I was protecting my legacy, as well as try to, to normalize the situation, because the Mandela family, as members in Johannesburg, here in Gauteng and Qunu, so I was at the center of activity. So writing about Madiba was a bit difficult, but I thought I had to write the story because it's important. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
Thank you, Bonile, for putting up this amazing exhibition and sharing it with us. Thank you, Sally, for really introducing the work so powerfully and insightfully. Those of you who want to hear more, and I hope you will, feel free to join us at the symposium we're holding on Monday, the 18th, in which we will be looking at this exhibition and extended ideas from this exhibition between 2 o'clock and 5:30 on Monday afternoon. If you'd like to attend, and you're very welcome to, please be in touch with Nilüfer, our administrator, and she will send you the link. So it's Nagdee, NAGDEE @uj.ac.za. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and I hope you found the exhibition as moving as I do. Thank you.